My name is Matt Logan. I'm the Executive Director of Montgomery History, and I want to welcome you to the 13th Annual Montgomery County History Conference. And before we get started, I would like to start by thanking our sponsors who, look at that, it's like NASCAR. We have logos everywhere. These people literally make this conference possible, and so if you see anyone, I believe it's with a purple tag. Do we have any purple tags? Go out of your way. There's a purple tag. Thank you. Yay, more purple tags. Thank you for your support. And there's two that I want to call out in particular, and that's the folks at Montgomery College and Brown Advisory. Their extraordinary support really has been quite special. I also want to thank some of the other folks who are here representing political officials. We have Jeff Samuels representing, there he is. Hey, Jeff. He's representing Senator Chris Van Hollen. Every time, I always want to say Congressman Van Hollen. Yes. And in a moment, we'll be hearing from Montgomery County Councilmember Will Jawando. We also later will be hearing from County Executive Mark Elrich. He'll be introducing the closing session on jazz. We have Councilmember Sidney Katz will be here later, and newly elected school board member Carla Silvestri will be here as well. So let's give a round of applause to all those folks. You may have noticed that we are beginning to celebrate our 75th anniversary. We were founded in 1944, and so this is a very exciting year for us. You'll be hearing about things coming up. June 29th is the actual date. That's going to be the date of our annual meeting, and we will have a special event on that day. So, as historians, we like to look back, and so the 75th is a perfect opportunity for us to reflect, but it's also an opportunity for us to look forward. And I think we have an obligation to future generations to look ahead and to think about that some of the things that we value about historical inquiry and historical research are passed on to future generations. One of the most urgent ones for us at Montgomery History is to think about what are the objects and the documents and the stories from 2019 that we need to be collecting now so that our counterparts celebrating our 100th anniversary in 2044 or our 150th anniversary in 2094 can look back and they'll have a clear picture of what Montgomery County was like in the early 21st century. And so it was with that last question in mind when I reached out to Will Jawando last month following his inauguration as a new member of the county council. Will, as you know, always is a striking figure, but he was even more so on the day of his inauguration because he was wearing this garment. So that Agdaba was a personal statement, as we'll hear, but it was also, for me, very much a symbol of Montgomery County in 2019 that's going to only have enhanced value as we look forward into the future. We have to remember that 1 in 3 of our fellow Montgomery County residents was born outside the United States. It's a stunning figure, but one that I think we all need to appreciate. So Will is an activist, an attorney, and a community leader with lifelong dedication to public service. He was born to a Nigerian father and a white mother in Silver Spring. His resume and list of accomplishments is, quite frankly, annoyingly long. And for someone so young, you ever meet those people and you just kind of, sorry, Will. So instead of reading his resume, I just want to recognize that Will and his wife, Michelle, are the proud new parents of a 9-day-old baby boy. So with that, I'd like to welcome Will Jawando to make a special announcement.
That's my greatest qualification. Not only is he 9 days old, he's actually 10 days today, so I was wrong, Matt, 10 days. He was born last Wednesday. We are the proud parents of 3 girls as well. So we have an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 5-year-old girl, and now a 10-day-old boy. So for those who come from families with one gender or the other, the stakes were high, and we didn't find out what we were having. So we found out in the moment as he was sliding out. I told the doctor the moment from the neck to get to the waist area, it seemed like it was in slow motion as she pulled him out. But we're all very excited. So, and there's a hat which is called an ashoke, which goes on top. They took the head off, but I will be delivering the hat. I was wearing a hat which is called an ashoke. It's part of the garment, but the agbada here is the main event, and so. But I will be delivering the hat. I want to thank Montgomery history in 75 years. That's a great accomplishment. Congratulations for that. You mentioned the 100th anniversary on 2054. I think I'll probably just be getting my new son out of college at that time. So hopefully I can come back there and be happy about that. Thank you for all your work. Thank you, Elizabeth and the team. There you are. She's the curator that put this together and got the mannequin. Let's just give her a quick round of applause for all the work she does. This is a great organization, and as Matt said, very important for our county. Thank you for pulling together this conference. What you're doing here today is recognizing the importance of history. It's a more inclusive and honest history. Talking about our history is the thing that I think gives us a way to put in context the challenges that we face today. And it's essential if we're going to have healing and understanding and move forward. You need only look at the national debate. Thank goodness I'm going to be leaving here shortly to go to a resource fair that we're sponsoring for furloughed workers, many of whom missed their second paycheck yesterday, maybe some in this room. And thankfully, we have a 3-week reprieve, but because of who we have in the White House, and I worked in the last good White House, in the Obama White House. I clap for that every day. We know we're in a time when understanding our history, particularly the history of divisiveness, of not appreciating new people who come here for opportunity, which is the story of everyone, unless you're an indigenous person in this, and even they cross the ice bridge at some point with little resistance other than the cold. But the story of America is the story of coming here for a better life, and I think recognizing our history is so important right now when we're almost repeating it again with the discussion of this crazy border wall. So that wasn't in my speech, but I just wanted to say that. History provides the opportunity for us and a roadmap to make right what are some serious wrongs in our community. Things like systemic racial inequity in our schools, in our public institutions. I'm very proud that our county council, along with our superintendent of schools and our head of Montgomery College right here, as well as many other leaders, our county executive participated in a 2-day racial equity training 2 weeks ago, where we talked about the importance of understanding how this country was founded, the beginnings of racial inequity, the creation of race to subjugate and dehumanize a people in order to set up a caste system that we still are struggling with today, and how we all need to keep that in mind when we're deciding on policies that impact the 1.1 million people here. It's also important because we need to honor the human and civil rights of people, whether it be their rights while interacting with police on the streets, or their rights to safe, affordable housing, high-quality health care, and economic opportunity. It's important to talk about history because we have a history here in Montgomery County that, like most places in the world and in the country, is not all good. Earlier this week, I was the lead co-sponsor for the Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission resolution, which includes the formation of a commission related to reconciliation and the placement of markers to mark where 3 public lynchings took place in Montgomery County in the 1800s. I invoked the name of those victims, and I'll do so again today: George W. Peck, John Diggs, and Sidney Randolph, all three who were violently murdered before public crowds right here in Montgomery County. I wonder if they could have imagined that I'd be standing here today and we'd be putting a piece of clothing and textile into Montgomery history. Probably not. It shows that progress happens, but we have to work for it. We have to confront this history, our history, and learn from it. Because as Matt said, today's Montgomery County looks vastly different than it did 155 years ago after the Emancipation Proclamation. Today, 4 of the most 10 diverse cities in the nation are here in Montgomery County. Our growing diversity includes Spanish speakers, West Africans, East, South, and Central Asians, immigrants from Eastern Europe, and all across the globe, and many, many first-generation children, Americans like me. And if you take the 33%, the 1 in 3 who are already born in another country, and you add their children, you get almost up to 45% of this county's residents who were either born in another country or their parents were born in another country. And that takes me to why I wore this agbada on Inauguration Day. I am proud, but also not so proud, that I'm only the second African American to ever represent the entire county. The first was Ike Leggett, who was elected to this position, County Council at Large, in 1986, more than 30 years ago. And he often tells the story that when he ran for office, he was fearful of putting his picture on his literature because he knew that in 1986 Montgomery County, or he thought that that would be an impediment to him getting elected. So they did not put a picture on his literature until after he won the primary. So when I wore this agbada, which is a traditional Nigerian garb and clothing that is worn for ceremonial purposes, weddings, big events, I did so not without hesitation. You know, I knew I would be doing something that people would look funny at me about and not necessarily understand, and all those nervous things that come when you do something new. But I wanted to do it because I wanted to honor my father and our Nigerian heritage. He had passed away just when I was starting this campaign last year. But I know he was with me every step of the way, and if he was at the inauguration, he would have been wearing something very similar to this. So it had a deep personal connection to me. But I also, as I thought about it, I wanted to honor the great diversity that we have here in Montgomery County. And so by wearing the agbada, I hope to send a signal to all of our residents of any race and any ethnicity that their voice and their heritage are an essential part of the fabric of Montgomery County, and that we need them if we are to be successful as a community. There's a story I want to share with you that I think I have to share it with you because we wouldn't be here if it didn't happen. About a week after the election, I went to the council office building for some orientation to pick my office, to literally measure the drapes, you know, as they say. And if you've been to that building, it's actually 3 buildings kind of put together. There's renovations going on. There's a big asbestos sign on the door, but you're safe, so you can still come visit me. You've probably gone through the routine of emptying your pockets at security, sliding your things through, similar to the airport. And you may have come into contact with some of the security guards that work there, many of whom are immigrants themselves, several of whom are West African immigrants. On this day, there were 2 gentlemen that were there, both from West Africa, one from Nigeria, one from Cameroon, which could be Central Africa, depending on the argument, but close to West Africa. When I explained to him my name and that I was a second-generation Nigerian elected to the council, he asked me, "What will you wear to your inauguration?" I was like, yeah, wow. I think someone said, wow. I just paused. You know, I'd seen this guy a couple times coming in and out, but we never had any serious interaction. The other one immediately said, "You will wear traditional clothing." He said it not as a question, but as a statement. almost as if it was a foregone conclusion and that there was no other option. And immediately, and Cecily, my chief of staff who's here, was with me, I said to her, I have to wear an agbada. I knew in that moment, almost as if my father was standing next to me, that I had to honor him and honor the heritage. It felt almost divine that the generations of my ancestors and his ancestors were with me in that moment and were whispering in my ear. But even larger than that, because we need to invite our new neighbors and friends into the process of our democracy, we need to include the people who look, sound, and live different from us in all aspects into our government if it's going to work for all of us. We should strive to meet people on their terms and not ask us to change to meet our expectations of what they should be. And that's hard work. It's not easy. Many people who've grown up here, in your lifetime, this community has gone from mostly homogeneous to where we are today. And that's difficult. That's different. Change is hard no matter when it happens or how it happens, and it's happened quickly here. But indeed, I believe our strength lies within that diversity. If we can figure it out here, so can the rest of America, so can the world. And I think no other place is better positioned than Montgomery County to show how you can live in a place that's diverse, that has all types of different types of people, that has a good economy, has good people that care about each other, and where we move together in prosperity and opportunity. When we all come from different cultures, it's really important that we respect and welcome differences, even when those differences come in ways we don't anticipate or even understand. So by wearing this agbada, this traditional West African clothing in a public setting to take the public oath of office, is part of a bigger and public dialogue that I think is needed if we are to understand and respect our differences and move forward. So I'm proud to have played a small part in that dialogue and continue to do that, and will do my best to do so. I'm humbled to be a part of this ceremony today, and I thank Matt and the whole Montgomery History team for including me in the conference. You're doing very important work. I hope you'll partner with us on our remembrances of lynching and other things that we're going to embark on so that we can understand and make sense of our history and of the past. And by doing so, tell the truth about the origins of today's society and the problems that we face. And moving together for a better, more inclusive future for everyone. So thank you very much.
Will, thank you very much. We're very lucky to have public officials like Will representing us in this county. Just to be clear, when I reached out to Will regarding the Agbada, I'm sorry.
See, we're learning already.
See, that's part of our cultural growth. I asked him if he would donate that to our permanent textile collection. And so that will be a part of this county's history in perpetuity. So it's an incredibly important object, but it's also this personal symbol, and I think for Montgomery history, I can't think of a better way to start the next 75 years and look ahead. So thank you very much.
Really nice. And as you imagine, a good suit, it's not inexpensive either. So.
He can't touch it anymore. We're good?
All right. Thank you very much again. Thanks again.
Appreciate it.
So Will has to depart for the furlough. But as he mentioned, I hear people occasionally talk about how Montgomery County is diversifying. But if you've been paying attention, it's happened. And, we don't just accept diversity, we celebrate it here. But that hasn't always been the case, as Will alluded to. And that's what Gene's talk is going to be about today. He's going to provide a sobering reminder of where we've come from. Gene is familiar to most of us as a reporter and editor for 30 years at the Washington Post. And since 2004, he's been an award-winning freelance journalist and an author. His new book is called Five for Freedom: The African-American Soldiers in John Brown's Army. Copies are available in the lobby. Much of Gene's writing is closely tied to his love of history, and this morning we're going to hear Gene talk about a topic that's both deeply embedded in the historic fabric of Montgomery County and essential for charting a course for the future where, to use the words of our new county executive, quote, all residents can pursue their dreams regardless of race, ethnicity, age, or economic circumstances. And with that, please help me welcome Eugene Meyer.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Councilman Giwando. I loved your talk, and I endorse it wholeheartedly. Well, good morning, and let me begin by saying that my name is Eugene Meyer, and even before Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post, I did not own the newspaper. That's directed to longtime Washingtonians, native Washingtonians. But I did work there for 34 years as a reporter and editor until 2004, and it was my way into Montgomery County's past. A wise editor there once gave me an interesting assignment. He said, go find a monument and write about a town. After consulting with the Montgomery County Historical Society, who else? I went to Bellsville, a tiny crossroads and sort of a suburb of Poolesville in the northwestern corner of the county. There on a bluff, I found the Monocacy Cemetery and a striking stone tablet. Okay. On it were 16 surnames, 32 names in all. These were among the 40 men who had crossed the Potomac on August 13th, 1862, cutting the telegraph wires below Poolesville, then swimming across the C&O Canal and fording the river. Led by Captain George Chiswell, they were known as Chiswell's Exile Band, and they went to fight for Dixie, joining the 35th Virginia Cavalry under the command of Colonel Elijah Veers White, a native of Montgomery who had moved to Loudon in 1857. Today's White's Ferry is named for him. A Union draft agent canvassing the area known as Medley's Election District after the owner of a tavern that had also served as a polling place, wrote next to the names of all the eligibles, gone south. Next to the stone slab was a small chapel. The door was unlocked, and I went inside. The pews were connected with cobwebs. In front was a small lectern, above which hung a sign. It said, "Lest we forget." Tattered stars and bars and stars and stripes flanked the wooden pulpit. Behind it were two water-stained portraits. On the left, Robert E. Lee. On the right, Stonewall Jackson. This was, I would learn, the meeting place of the E.V. White chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy, which had lasted until 1947. Dorothy Elgin, the wife of then Poolesville Mayor Charlie Elgin, kept the records. Both had family names on the memorial slab. If the Potomac River had bent in the opposite direction, Charlie told me, we'd be in Loudoun County, and I might feel more at home. This then was my introduction to the Montgomery County that is only generations gone but long forgotten. Starting with the names on the slab, I was able to trace the families down to the present, to interview descendants, to gain a better understanding of where we live, a place now in multicultural, majority-minority county of 1 million plus residents that prides itself on its progressive politics, but also a county that largely ignores, downplays, or has little awareness of its own discomforting past. To understand postbellum Montgomery requires knowledge as well of the antebellum county. The story begins in the 18th century when families from southern Maryland moved up to the area, bringing with them their slaves and their cherished southern way of life. At first, they tried raising tobacco, as they had in Tidewater. But the Piedmont soil was not conducive to the crop, so they switched to grains, wheat, corn, barley, and hay. In 1860, the county's population was a mere 18,322 people, of whom 5,021 were enslaved, another 1,552 were free blacks, and 11,749, nearly two-thirds, were whites. The down county communities of Chevy Chase, Silver Spring, and Bethesda had yet to emerge. Rockville was the county seat, but Poolesville rivaled it in importance. Washington, D.C. was still distant. Frederick was the closest city of any consequence, with names like Allnut, Bell, Butler, Chiswell, Dade, Darby, Dickerson, and Elgin, on down through the alphabet. They were known as the ABCs of Montgomery County. Elsewhere in the county, 100 slaves toiled on the 600-acre Peter family farm, land that is now NIH and the Bethesda Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. The Magruder family, with its cohort of 23 slaves, and William Orndorff, with 18 slaves, including 6 children, owned the land occupied today by Montgomery Mall. And Peter Posey, with 12 slaves, owned the area that is now the West Bard Shopping Center off River Road, the source of recent controversy over its redevelopment into a less suburban, more urban mixed-use center. Old Georgetown Road, James Riley's slave property, included Josiah Hanson, whose 1849 memoir would inspire Harriet Beecher Stowe to write Uncle Tom's Cabin. But Hanson was no Uncle Tom in the more recent sense of the word. He had tried to purchase his freedom along with those of his wife and children, but Riley reneged on the deal, and Hanson with his family escaped to Ontario, Canada, where he founded the Dawn Settlement, composed of free blacks and fugitive slaves. Many of their descendants still live there today, while Hanson has gone largely unrecognized here in Montgomery. The story of the county's Confederate legacy would become the basis for a chapter in my first book, Maryland Lost and Found. Even Unionists were slave owners. Only in the northeast corner of the county did the abolitionist cause take hold. Sandy Spring Quakers had freed their slaves by 1834. Henceforth, they opposed slavery, but they were not fiery militants. Given these demographics, the 1860 election produced predictable results. Only 50 votes for Abraham Lincoln, and not one in Medley. John Breckinridge, the Southern Democratic candidate, received 46%, and John Bell of Tennessee, candidate of the Constitutional Union Party, 47%. Little wonder then that when the South seceded from the Union, so too did a large number of Montgomery's residents. Initially, as many white residents enlisted in the Union Army as in the Confederate, about 130 on each side. However, local historian Bill Offutt, who had ancestors on both sides, told me it pretty much broke on economic lines. The Confederate cavalry volunteers were mostly sons of wealthy slave owners. The ones who became infantrymen for the Union were the sons of tenant farmers and the yeomanry. The men in Medley who went south at first thought they had volunteered for Border Patrol, but soon found themselves in the thick of some of the heaviest fighting in Virginia. Meanwhile, at home, Poolesville changed hands between Union and Confederate forces several times. Landowners filed claims with the federal government for damage allegedly done by Union troops. Some area residents, including the editor of the Montgomery County Sentinel, wound up in the old Capitol Prison on the present-day site of the Supreme Court for their secessionist sentiments. Meanwhile, Maryland has voted, very narrowly, for a new state constitution in 1864 that freed its slaves. In Montgomery County, the vote was 3-1 against. This hallmark reform, however, inspired an uncounted number of former Montgomery slaves to enlist in the U.S. colored troops and fight for the new, now intertwined causes of preserving the Union and abolishing slavery. Montgomery's Confederate soldiers returned from the war defeated but unbowed. They continued to rule Montgomery. as county commissioners, as judges, as state senators, well into the middle of the 20th century. Many of them gathered with their families at the Monocacy Cemetery on Confederate Memorial Day. That was June 3rd, the birth date of Confederate President Jefferson Davis. In 1911, the E.V. White chapter of the UDC came into being with 35 members. Its first formal meeting was held at the Poolesville National Bank. Later, the town hall, and now home to the historic Medley District Museum. The marble cemetery tablet was erected the same year. The United Daughters of the Confederacy and United Confederate Veterans dedicated the statue to Montgomery men who fought for the South in Rockville on June 3, 1913. Some 3,000 cheering citizens showed up for the occasion in a county of then only 20,000 people, 1/6 of the population. Consider, that would be the equivalent of 150,000 people cheering for a similar occasion today in a county of 1 million plus residents. To our heroes of Montgomery County, Maryland, the inscription reads, that we through life may not forget to love the thin gray line. The county has no comparable Union monument. Confederate veteran Richard Poole Hayes, who had raised money for the monument, had hoped that it would be located not in Rockville, but in Monocacy Cemetery. But its location at the county seat better reflected the white majority view. Lingering in nostalgia for the lost cause prevailed well into the mid-20th century when people from the North who had come to Washington during the New Deal and World War II began to move to the close-in suburbs just beyond the district line. Almost overnight, the political and social complexion of the county changed. We thought we were a cliche, had everything our way, summed up Dorothy Butler Hotkins, the granddaughter of Confederate Charles Martin Butler. Then she told me everything opened up. The new residents would know little or nothing about a history that included 3 lynchings, 2 in 1880, one in Poolesville, and one in 1896. The first to be lynched in January 1880 was George Peck, 22. A brutal Negro lynched for attempted outrage, blared the Washington Post headline, using the euphemism for rape. Peck, 22, had allegedly attempted to rape a white girl who was milking a cow. The Sentinel approved of the lynching. It wrote, "This mode of meting out justice to such a miscreant, when there is no doubt of his identity, will be commended by all law-abiding citizens." At Poolesville, a mob overtook the officer assigned to protect him and hung him from a locust tree in front of the Presbyterian church. At 10 a.m. the next morning, the sheriff cut the body down as people were on their way to worship. The region around the city, the capital of the nation, wrote the New York Times, has become notorious for the punishment of colored criminals by lynch law and for a public sentiment which supports those who in this way administer what they believe justice demands. The last lynching took place a mile from today's Rockville Town Center, just east of the railroad and metro tracks, in what is now an industrial area. Sidney Randolph, a black itinerant worker from Georgia, had been accused of committing a brutal axe attack that killed 70-year-old Sadie Buxton and wounded her parents and sister. Now, there was quite a bit of controversy over this. There was a shirt that was found that belonged to Randolph, and it had red stains all over it, and it was perceived to be blood, turned out later to be paint. Sidney Randolph was taken to the old Garfield Hospital, where Mrs. Buxton was recovering from her wounds. She could not identify him. And there was quite a lot of coverage in the Washington papers and speculation that the real assailant had been a white man. Didn't matter. Randolph was taken to Baltimore for his own protection, then he was brought back to Rockville, and he was taken out and sequestered in the evenings to be in a safe place. But one night, he was at the jail, and a mob arrived, and an advance party knocked on the door, and they told the jailer they were there to deliver a prisoner. The jailer let him in. The jail was overpowered, and they dragged him out, it was later said, like a dog. Put him in a wagon, took him a mile to the spot I just mentioned, where he was hanged from a chestnut tree. Randolph had professed his innocence to the very end. He was hanged on the 4th of July, Independence Day, 1896. He was buried in a pauper's grave a few blocks from Montgomery County's gleaming new courthouse. When the county sold the land for development, 38 remains, presumably including Randolph's, were moved to Park Lawn Cemetery a few miles away on Beers Mill Road. A cemetery employee told me they were reinterred in Section 18 with, quote, no markers, no nothing. Little Sadie was more ceremoniously buried in Forest Oak Cemetery near the county fairgrounds in Gaithersburg, right off 355. It's easily located in the middle of the cemetery, and it's still a peaceful spot, despite the encroaching development and rush hour traffic. Searching for a Buxton relative still living in the county, I found one in Damascus. Stephen Buxton had come late to this bit of family history. I was doing genealogy in my 20s and 30s and stumbled across it, he told me. I never knew about this as a boy growing up. I certainly deplore the lynching, whether he was guilty or not. Who were these murderers, these lynchers? Invariably, grand juries were convened, but there were no indictments. The conclusion was always the crimes were committed by persons unknown. In Randolph's case, the governor even offered a reward for information leading to apprehension of the lynchers, but there were no takers. It begs the question, are descendants of the mob still living in Montgomery County? Or maybe in this room, perhaps? Are there painful family secrets they have harbored over the generations? Will justice ever be done? Can true reconciliation ever occur without it? The county's last lynching occurred in the same year the Supreme Court, in the case of Plessy versus Ferguson, enshrined separate but equal as the law of the land for 6 decades. But by then, segregation was already well established here in unreconstructed Montgomery County. But some of the county's slave history might be categorized as morally ambiguous. I found one such case in the Office of the Register of Wills in Rockville. The story begins before the war, but it's still the stuff of family lore, if not hidden, then closely held. Newcomers to our county would not then know about Nathan Talbot, whose antebellum will decreed that upon his death, his enslaved woman Harriet and her 4 children, described in his last will as yellow, be manumitted and removed at the estate's expense to a free state. Anticipating opposition, Nathan warned that anyone attempting, quote, to set aside my last will and testament, close quote, was to be entirely excluded from any participation of any part or parcels of my estate. The will would indeed be contested by 2 sons who claimed their father had been unduly influenced by the slaves. 3 months later, the suit was withdrawn. The sons continued to own slaves until they were freed under the state's 1864 Constitution. Nathan Talbot's possessions, according to an accounting in November 1839, included the following: old dishes and plates valued at 60 cents, a stack of hay, $8.55, 80 bushels of wheat, $120, a bedstead and furniture, $17, a wagon, $35, and wagon gear, $5. Also listed were one Negro woman named Harriet, supposed to be 45, and valued at $150. One Negro girl, Anne Maria, 21, $600. Another girl, Mary Ellen, 19, $600. William, 25, $800. And John, 7, $250. Total human value, $2,400. And that's in 1839 dollars. You'd have to update that to see what they were worth in today's currency. By March 1841, Nathan's executor reported all had been freed and carried out of state of Maryland in obedience to the directions of the will. I suspected that Harriet's children were also Nathan's, and I was able to track down a Talbot descendant, a lawyer in Frederick, who confirmed that the scandalous secret had long been accepted as fact in his family. 16 Talbots, including Nathan, are buried in Monocacy Cemetery. I was unable to locate Harriet's descendants, but in my research, I did learn that many of the descendants of Montgomery slaves are still here, some of them living in rural enclaves like Sugar Land, Jonesville, and Jerusalem, not far from Poolsville that sprang up after the Civil War. Philip Johnson, a founder of Sugar Land, had belonged to Dr. Stephen White, who owned 42 slaves. In the 1930s, Johnson told New Deal interviewers that, quote, "We all liked the missus, but the overseer was so cruel, I promised him a killing if I ever got big enough." In 2006, I interviewed his grandson, Philip S. Johnson III, then 87, still in Sugar Land. For a while, in 1930, he had actually lived with his grandfather, who sharecropped for white farmers and was also a preacher. He didn't talk much about slavery because he was mistreated quite a bit, said the grandson, who was a World War II veteran retired from the county school system, where he worked as a building services manager. Of his grandfather in slavery times, Philip Johnson III said, "Coming up, I didn't think much about it. I was young then. Now I'm older. Now I think about it. Now I realize more and more about it." Down county, there were and are places like Littonsville and Silver Spring and Kengar off Connecticut Avenue. There was also Hawkins Lane on 3 acres purchased by James Hawkins, a former slave, in 1893 for $300. 6 homes were built there in the 1920s and a few more in the 30s. For decades, Hawkins' descendants lived there off Jones Ridge Road next to the Bethesda Military Hospital complex until more recent gentrification changed the demographics. The houses remain, the people are gone. I was reminded of these changes when I wrote another article for Bethesda Magazine, this time on the 50th anniversary of school desegregation here, where it was implemented neither rapidly nor equitably. The widely accepted narrative is that it went well. Indeed, Maryland in the 1950s was not the Deep South. There were no riots, no massive resistance to the Supreme Court's ruling, reversing the doctrine of separate but equal. The only visible protest was in Poolesville, where there were some pickets and white parents, mostly relative newcomers from southwestern Virginia, kept their children out of school for a few days. But the truth is also that things did not go all that well elsewhere either. It took the county a full 7 years to implement the May 1954 Supreme Court decision, and the process itself was fraught with injustice. While PTAs at the county's black schools pushed for immediate compliance, the school board balked. First, it said there would have to be state legal opinion, since Maryland law specifically provided for black schools. Then, the word was gradualism, integrating a grade a year, so that full integration would take a dozen, nearly a generation. The 1955 Supreme Court mandate for integration with all deliberate speed became an excuse for inaction. The problems weren't all up county. In Chevy Chase, parents at Rollingwood Elementary School protested integration that would have brought black children from Littonsville, less than 2 miles away. Instead of picketing, they wrote letters and filed a formal appeal to the State Board of Education, which turned them down. The black schools were all closed, even though 4 were practically brand new. Black teachers were reassigned, white teachers weren't. George Washington Carver High School in Rockville, which opened in 1952 for blacks, seemingly to maintain at least the appearance of separate but equal, would become what it is today, the Carver Educational Center, home to the County Board of Education and school administrative offices. In writing about desegregation, I interviewed several residents of Littonsville who had attended the Linden School on Garfield Avenue off Brookville Road. It was 2 rooms with 1st through 3rd grades in one and 4th through 7th in the other, and a cloakroom and kitchen in between, recalled Charlotte Cofield. There was a potbelly stove in each room and no indoor plumbing. Instead, there were paths in the woods that led to outdoor privies. Textbooks were hand-me-downs from white schools with pages missing, answers written in. Even the furniture was handed down, she told me. Yet we managed. We accepted that because that's what we knew. The boys cleaned the floors once a week to keep the dust down. The girls cooked meals in the kitchen. Movies were shown at the school because we couldn't go to the Silver Spring theaters. With integration, the Linden School was closed and demolished. Even then, the integration of Littonsville students at nearby Montgomery Hills Junior High School was problematic. Social dancing was a required class, but mixed dancing was strictly forbidden. To ensure that there would be no interracial dancing, whites and blacks were paired up separately. One day, the numbers got mixed up, Teresa Tyson Saxton told me, and my number matched with that of a white boy. I didn't make an issue of it, neither did he. But when the gym class was over, the teacher pulled me aside and said that was not supposed to happen, and if it did, I should give back my number. Also at Montgomery Hills a few years later, El Moriah, Stewart told me a white boy asked me to dance. I was down on the floor dancing with a white boy asked me. The teacher sent me to the office like I was doing something wrong. In social studies, she said students watch outdated films, quote, with all the happy slaves, everybody smiling, jumping around. We were told we had to learn history. At Blair High School, from which she graduated in 1965, she said, they kept putting me in non-college prep classes. Some guy told me that people from my neighborhood don't go to college. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not ancient history. Recently, I wrote about the centennial of the Talbot Avenue Bridge, a rickety wood and iron link that connects Littonsville with North Woodside. For decades, it was the only way black residents on one side could get to shopping and jobs, mainly as domestics, on the other. Silver Spring subdivisions were racially restricted by covenants, and Silver Spring theaters and restaurants were also segregated. As a white resident said in 1967 to Judith Fiores, writing then for the Washingtonian magazine, quote, "It's nice, there's no color here." The reaction to my close-to-home piece that ran in a Sunday edition of the Washington Post was instructive. Longtime white residents, Facebook friends in fact, said they had no idea such conditions existed, and they thanked me for filling in the gaps in their knowledge of hometown history. Black lives matter, as we are repeatedly reminded. History also matters. Which brings us back to the recent renewed controversy over the Confederate statue that stood facing south for more than a century in Rockville. It began in a place of honor in front of the old red brick courthouse. But in a late 20th century response to critics, the statue was moved off to the side, nearly hidden behind a grove of bushes. But that didn't end it. In 2016, after someone spray painted Black Lives Matter at the base of the statue, it was sheathed nearly up to the soldier's neck in plywood, a purpley painted gray, with a small peephole through which one could try to read the inscription. Nobody it seemed wanted it. Not the city of Rockville, not the County Historical Society, which deemed it unsuitable for the lawn of its venerable Belle Dawson house. The statue could be removed or even demolished, but the history cannot. At last, the statue was rescued from the junk heap of history. The Confederate soldier now stands on privately owned land at White's Ferry, named for Elijah Veers White, as you will recall, the county under whom the men of Medley fought in the 35th Virginia Cavalry. Given the symbolism, it seems a fitting resting place by the Potomac River. The men had crossed to fight for the Confederacy and its ignoble cause of slavery. Yet, it is out of sight and out of mind, except for the few ferryboat commuters who crossed the river on the Jubal A. Early, named for the Confederate general who ranged across Montgomery and nearly captured Washington in 1864. So now with the statue duly sequestered, most of the county can remain blissfully ignorant of this less than laudable chapter in our postbellum history. Talbot County on the Eastern Shore faced a similar problem. Its Boys of Talbot statue on the courthouse lawn memorializes Talbot citizens who fought for the South. Finally, in 2011, another statue was erected nearby to Frederick Douglass, the famed abolitionist and statesman from Talbot. As a teenager, he had escaped from the Tillman plantation near St. Michael's and went on to Baltimore and to greatness. Here in Montgomery, a similar statue could be erected to the memory of Josiah Hanson, the escaped slave whose story, as I mentioned earlier, inspired Harriet Beecher Stowe and who found freedom in Canada. But there has been no campaign on his behalf. But Monocacy Cemetery and the memorial tablet remain to remind us of another time in the same place and of the county's southern roots. If Richard Poole Hayes had had his way, Montgomery County's Confederate statue would also have been erected in the cemetery, and that would have been that, out of sight, out of mind, but not entirely forgotten. One recent Memorial Day, Robert Chiswell of Gaithersburg publicly posted a photograph of the tablet at Monocacy Cemetery on the Facebook page, "You know you grew up in Montgomery County, if you." A Memorial Day tradition, he wrote, a visit to the Monocacy Cemetery in Belleville to see family history. It drew 117 likes, 6 hearts, and 3 sad faces. "There's a lot of old county family names there," someone wrote. The bottom right, John B. Munger is my great-grandfather, wrote a 1962 BCC graduate. James W. Reed is my ancestor, wrote William Reed of Rockville. From Charlotte, North Carolina, Bob Poole, a Wheaton High School graduate, wrote, "My family are buried there also. Wish I could be there to pay my respect." The recent unpleasantness, as the Civil War was once referred to euphemistically in certain unreconstructed circles, may seem like ancient history to some, but it is more recent than we like to admit or even to know. We didn't need Charlottesville to tell us that, though the hate-fueled march by Confederate flag-waving white nationalists, ostensibly to protest the removal of a statue memorializing Robert E. Lee, was certainly a grim reminder. More hopefully, there is a recent movement to remember and memorialize the victims of mob lynching through the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery, Alabama, and through a local committee formed here in Montgomery County, Maryland. It is a start. But I hope that the Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission, formally proposed last week in the County Council, and as he mentioned, Councilman Giwando is one of the sponsors, will tell the truth not only about the 19th century lynchings and solemnly and respectfully memorialize the victims, but also about more recent racial history in this county, which may discomfort longtime white descendants even as it shocks newer arrivals who thought perhaps they were living in the North. Sorry to break that news. I hope, too, that these efforts spring organically from those whose ancestors suffered the most from past racial injustices, as well as from committed newcomers to the county. Finally, I would like to say that living while black is no longer potentially a capital offense, but tragically, I cannot say that. We live with this horrific legacy in the daily headlines, maybe not currently here in Montgomery County, but nearby and elsewhere in Maryland, and not just in distant places. Here's what former New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu, a white Southerner, told the New York Times recently. It is essential, if we really want to move forward, that we do so together. We cannot do that unless we deal forthrightly with the issue of race. And unless and until we do that, we're never going to reach that aspirational moment where out of many we are one. In order to overcome our past, this is me speaking now, we must do more than acknowledge it. We must own it, all of it, and all of us. Thank you for listening. We have time for, okay.
We do have time for some questions. We have microphones on the side. If there is anyone who, right there.
My name is Glen Wallace. I am on the board of Monocacy Cemetery, and I'm the Monocacy Cemetery historian. It is a pleasure. This was a surprise to me, and I appreciate the fact that you spoke about it. It is true that while our board was considering having the statue brought up there because the Daughters of the Confederacy and the ancestors had paid for it, somebody forced our decision by visiting our cemetery and spray painting the word shame across that tablet in red spray paint. We knew then that we could not accept the statue. And it's difficult. It's difficult that history has to be hidden. We were opposed to what was happening at the time. We accepted the fact that it needed to happen because so much was, people were getting riled. But then when they attack a cemetery and they attack the memory of the people on that that are engraved on that tablet, we made the decision not to accept it. I just wanted to clarify that and underscore the importance of your message.
Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
I'm Emily Carell, a former employee of Montgomery History, who back in 1998 wrote something for the Montgomery County Story, which is the monograph people should really look at and read, on crime in Montgomery County. And it started out because I was partially writing about the lynchings. All three of them are related in that. And the other thing is, on my phone, I have pictures, photographs of the Maryland lynching monument from the Equal Justice Initiative museum down in Montgomery, Alabama, which is where I was born. So if anybody wants to see it, it's really frightening, but it's here.
Thank you.
Hello. I was just wondering, I grew up here and went to primary and secondary school here. And in your kind of research, have you run into, like, is the county working in this history into the school curriculum? In other words, are we teaching our young residents anything? I mean, I grew up a mile from, not even a mile from the Josiah Hanson house. I had no idea,
Well, I don't think that that Maryland or local history is taught in the schools anymore. I think it used to be fourth grade was devoted to Maryland history. To the best of my knowledge, none of this is taught. It absolutely should be at some level.
Hello. Hi. I am so glad that you talked about Josiah Hanson in such nice, kind words. I read his autobiography and I was just blown away that there's so many historical things there, and you could actually walk around Montgomery County and see what he was talking about. He was just such a great hero. And I don't know if you know it, but there is a possibility that there will be a marker for Josiah Hanson of some sort. Tilden Middle School, they're going to rename it because they're going to turn it into a high school. And one of the names floating around is the Josiah Hanson High School. And it would be appropriate because Tilden Middle School is right across the street from where the Riley Farm was. And I was wondering if maybe you might support that cause with the Board of Education and send him a letter telling him what a great hero he was. Because I have been sorely disappointed when I went to the African American History and Cultural Museum in Washington, D.C. They do talk about Harriet Beecher Stowe and Uncle Tom's Cabin, but there is no mention of Josiah Hanson. And like I said, he was such a Montgomery County hero that we really, really need to honor him.
I know there was an effort by, I think it's the Montgomery Parks Foundation, to raise some money for the site of the Riley Plantation related to Josiah Hanson. And please keep me apprised of developments, and I'd be happy to help in any way I could.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to actually add that the Montgomery Parks owns the Riley Farm, which is the property of Isaac Riley, where Reverend Josiah Hanson was enslaved. And they have been doing a multi-year effort to build a major museum at that site. I think they're nearing the point of having the funds to do that. And it will be both an interpretation of the historic house, but also a separate detached museum that will focus completely on and will commemorate the history of Josiah Hanson. So there is a very, very active effort underway. I know they have, I think, enough funds to get started, but they're always looking for contributions if anyone wants to make a contribution. But it should be a really amazing commemoration of this important person.
Thank you.
History, as we know, is complicated, as certainly the message of your talk, and multi-layered. The proposal to rename Tilden Middle School, which was Charles Woodward High School, is a dilemma for a lot of historians. It's not really a choice between black and white, so to speak. It's a choice between two important historical figures. Charles Woodward was the judge in Montgomery County who was assigned the case of a African-American teacher at the Rockville Colored School, as it was called, a two-room school, much like Linden School that you described. The Teacher was William Gibbs. He was suing the county, suing the school board for unequal pay. Most African-American teachers, all African-American teachers in Montgomery County, this was in the Depression, 1937. The case was heard, and he was arguing for equal salaries. His attorney was a very young Thurgood Marshall at the time, just out of Howard Law School. Charles Wood, the school board had filed a motion to have the case thrown out of court because it was, segregation was the law of the land. And Charles Woodward allowed the case to go forward. The county school board decided to settle rather than have a full-blown hearing, pointing out all the inequities in the school system. So it's choosing between two important historical figures in renaming Charles Woodward High School.
Well, that's interesting. Again, the history's not taught. I mean, how many students who go to Walter Johnson High School know anything about Walter Johnson? You know, and you know these arguments are taking place. There was just a big argument in Alexandria over Washington Lee High School, I guess, right? And so these are ongoing conversations, and sometimes there aren't, you know, real easy answers to them. But I can see the strong argument made for Josiah Hanson being memorialized in some public way.
I'm Lawrence Patlin. I attended Rosemary Hills Elementary School near Littonsville. And it may have been the first few years that Rosemary Hills was integrated. I was wondering if you had any recollections from Littonsville or other residents from that time, in addition to Montgomery Hills Junior High.
When Rosemary Hills was integrated, and then it was designed so that the students from African American students and white students would attend, I think, Rosemary Hills for the first 3 grades, and then they went to North Chevy Chase for 4th through 6th. And I don't have direct knowledge of that, but there are others who do.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Okay, well, thank you very
All
much.
right. Well, thank you, Gene.